Thank you to everyone who has joined us today in this webinar. We're really excited to be here. We're honored that CCRCD has asked us to host this. I'm Aurora Cartagena. I am the wildfire planner for the Diablo Range District of California State Parks, which includes Mount Diablo. And with me today is Mason Hyland. Mason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my name's Mason Hyland, environmental scientist with the Diablo Range District, California State Parks. Also, big thanks to everybody who is able to attend and watch this. Excited to be here with you all.
Hey, Mason, would you like to pull up the PowerPoint and we'll get rolling?
Yeah, let's get it going. Bear with us just a second. And how does that look? Good.
Loading. There it is.
All right. Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to talk to you today about returning some good fire to Mount Diablo State Park. Next slide.
There we go. Got it.
All right, so this is what the next roughly 45 minutes is going to look like. We're going to talk about what Mount Diablo looked like during tribal fire practice in European prehistory, then how it kind of changed in the following decades during a period of larger fire exclusion. Then we'll move into looking at how fire acts as a land management tool for California state parks, and we're going to compare it to some other land management tools that are kind of in our arsenal. Then we're going to end by addressing a little bit about how you as landowners can use fire in your land management practices moving forward. The next slide.
In my role as an environmental scientist with California State Parks, I run our prescribed fire program. Specifically, like I consider myself a fire practitioner, something of a fire ecologist. I want to be clear that I'm not necessarily an expert on cultural fire practices. However, it is a big part of what we are sort of trying to emulate here in California State Parks. So we're going to talk a little about like ecological conditions pre-contact or pre-colonization, and then we're going to go into a bit about what conditions changed after fire exclusion, after colonization. Specifically, so pre-contact, our landscape was very different from what it is today. Indigenous people used fire as a tool to manage the landscape. The quality of the land itself was very different. We don't the knowledge that we have of the pre-contact plant like vegetation and land quality is limited. But what we do know is that people showed up and saw like park-like settings, land that looked like it was, one big garden. We know that there were huge amounts of wildlife. Like the soils were really healthy. Everything was really clear. You could walk underneath the trees. And everything essentially was adapted to fire. And what we know of, and what is still practiced in cultural fire is that there's this perspective of people being a part of the landscape and the landscape being a part of the people. And the two are really interconnected. And so these landscapes essentially were tended by indigenous people to be incredibly productive for not only the benefit of humans, but also the benefit of everything else. And during colonization, here we have this these numbers here, 1864 to 1973, as fire exclusion. Those are somewhat arbitrary throughout the state. I'm sure these numbers differed when fire was effectively stopped being used as a management tool by indigenous people. But 1864 was essentially the birth of our California State Park system. And 1973 was the birth of our prescribed fire program within our state park system. Um, and so basically, as indigenous people were being removed from the landscape and governments were starting to take over large tracts of land, specifically like the creation of the Forest Service, the National Forest Service. There was this view that all fire was bad, that all fire was negative. Um, and that that ethos of fire being bad spread throughout the entire country and led to a regime of fire suppression where every single fire had to be put out. And and it turned into kind of a militant thing where it's like every fire, even especially trying to catch them when they're small, um, uh, that led to a change in disturbance regimes. And you could imagine a change from incredibly frequent fire, like fire being managed by these indigenous people, where it's being returned to the landscape, in some cases every year, every few years, depending on the vegetation type, the plant community. Now, all of a sudden, being removed entirely for decades, even over a century in a lot of cases, that things would change pretty dramatically. So plants continue to grow. They plants that die don't get recycled as in the same way. So fuel builds up over time. Uh, you have things in shade tolerant plants in the understory that start to come up and make things really brushy and difficult to walk through, difficult to see. They create ladder fuels, which are fuels that allow fire from on the surface of the ground to climb up into the canopies. And then along with that, you have um, people moving in um, and moving in livestock, and with that moving other plant species that were not native to California. And so these species are now moving in things like all of our annual grasses, or a lot of the annual grasses that we see on Mount Diablo and throughout the state are introduced from Europe. And so we have species like those, and then we have also other ones that uh, are a little bit more commonly seen as invasives, like yellow star thistle or barb goatgrass, Italian thistle, things like that, all moving in and starting to really change the plant communities that we have around. Those all create stresses on the existing plant community. And with those stressors come like a little bit less resilience in the plant community. So then when things happen like climate change and drought, plants are uh, less able to fight off things like pests and diseases. So especially on Mount Diablo, we see a lot of our tree species starting to get impacted by pests and having large die-offs. Things like our knobcomb pines and coulter pines there have been hit really hard in the past years. Um, And part of this is just this combination of stressors that's all interacting and allowing pests and diseases to proliferate. And really, this era is kind of marked by a different perspective, and a perspective of being separate from the land, and that the land is its own thing, and that we are carrying, that people aren't supposed to be a part of it, that it's supposed to take care of itself, and we leave it alone and preserve it rather than tend to it as a part of it. Yeah, and then in 1973, California State Parks decided to, with a lot of effort, to do their first fires. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Aurora.
Great. Thanks, Mason. So as I kind of move through this next slide, I'm hoping you, as the audience, can keep what Mason said in mind, this concept of being like a part of the land versus separate from the land. I think that'll help you kind of conceptualize the paradigm that state parks moves into. In the 1970s, there was a back to the land movement that was kind of happening throughout the United States. And this movement was characterized by kind of an embracing of natural processes, which included fire as a natural event on natural lands. The movement kind of shied away from sort of more heavy-handed chemical application of the 1950s, and really combined with the advancing just knowledge of fire behavior and benefits of fire. Ranching practices began to change at this time, and public perception of fire also was altered. We started to understand from witnessing wildfire events, studying the benefits that happen to the land after an event. It really started to inform state parks programming. And so in 1973, as Mason mentioned, the Natural Resources Division of California State Parks developed a program, the Fire Management Program. And this was essentially built out of just capacity. In the 70s, we all of a sudden had advancements in technology that allowed for better fire equipment, better personal protective equipment when engaging with fire. There was better training that we were able to access, better training that we were able to give. And there was just more evidence of benefits coming to the forefront, which really built our fire knowledge. And one of the main suppliers of our growing capacity for knowledge about how fire behaves and what it does for us really came from our improved relationships with tribes. Our relationships with people that claim ancestral territory at Mount Diablo is ongoing. But really, there are so many cultural fire practitioners within Native American tribes that claim ancestral heritage to Mount Diablo and other state park units. Their oral histories are so rich with knowledge about the benefits and the application of cultural fire that ancestors have been engaging with for generations. So really, this tribal ecological knowledge, or TEK, has been a huge catalyst for the inflation of the knowledge base of the fire program in state parks. So better capacity to engage and apply fire really created just a well-rounded program. And it enabled us to ask a very important question. And that was, with the creation of the fire management program in parks, did we want to become a fire response agency, which prioritized suppression? Like Mason was discussing earlier, this concept that all fire is bad. Do we want to focus on suppression, or do we want to rather embrace fire in a clever and very medicinal way, so that we can reap its benefits and also maintain a program that is sustainable. And so in the 70s, we really started to look at how using fire in a prescribed way would help us fulfill our mission statement. And in our mission statement, it does emphasize the protection of natural and cultural resources and providing opportunities for high quality outdoor recreation. And so we know from studying fire that the benefits to natural resources are huge. We understand how fire can take away invasive species. It can improve habitat for for native species. Um, there are even species that will germinate within the ashes of fire. We call some, of these species fire friendly, like the beautiful fire poppy that you see on your screen is an example of one of these wildflowers that is found on Mount Diablo that really explodes after we have a fire event there. So we know that fire speaks to the protection of our natural resources. We also know that fire can often be a less impactful land management tool to our cultural resources that are on the mountain versus maybe some of the other land management tools that we have, which would be potentially more harmful to those resources. And Mason's going to talk a little bit more about other management options in a little bit. But so as we come to this concept of fulfilling our mission statement, protecting natural and cultural resources, we also understand that having the mountain in its most native state, right? Fire being a part of that process is really what's going to provide that the highest level, the highest quality of recreation for the people who come visit our park. And so fire as a prescribed program is really a vital tool for state parks and particularly at Mount Diablo in order to fulfill that mission statement and do what we said we were going to do for the recreating public. So I've talked a little bit about, fire is good and we want to use fire in a clever way, but like what is fire actually doing when we apply it? So Mason's going to talk to you in a bit more detail about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Um, so benefits of prescribed fire. I've split this up into these three main bullet points. So ecological benefits, cultural benefits, and societal benefits. Um, in my mind, they're a little bit difficult to tease out, but I did my best to kind of put it into these few categories for us here. Uh, we'll start with the ecological benefits because like Aurora mentioned, California state parks, rather than becoming a fire suppression agency to manage its fire, decided to focus on ecological benefits because it felt like that's what fit the mission of parks best. And so these are a handful of things um, that I could go into lots of detail about each and every one of them. But these are some things that are really specific, or mostly only able to be achieved using fire as a land management tool. One like Aurora talked about, that fire poppy, seed germination is a huge one. And there are a huge number of plant species that are native to California that require both the heat, both and or the heat from fire and chemicals in smoke and ash to trigger germination. It's like a cue for them to germinate. And not just seed germination, but other plants are invigorated by these same things, either by having the heat from things burning off over top of them, or the chemicals in ash actively telling them that it's time to grow. So things like bulbs respond really, really strongly to these different chemicals and these different I guess physical properties of fire when applied to the landscape. Um, and that is something that you only get with fire, with the application of fire on the landscape. Um, it's also can be used when it's appropriately used as like a selective thinning method. So the photo here is actually a burn that we did at Mount Diablo that was specifically focused to help manage barb goatgrass, which is the plant that's in my hand there. Um, and so we timed the burn specifically when this particular plant was starting to flower. It's an annual plant, so it gives all of its energy into its flower at some point. But before the seed had time to form and become mature. And so you can see at the bottom of that little stem, it's burned off. And so there's no more energy going up to it. So we timed it so that we could thin out this one particular species of plant, and we were quite successful at it. This was in May of 2024. It also helps with nutrient cycling, and and can help build soil. So again, like all of the nutrients, the chemicals that are in ash are specific to fire, and there aren't any other ways of being able to get that in there. And then it also promotes biodiversity, um, and when it is used appropriately, um, where you have this seed germination, um, you have new growth coming back afterwards, both from grasses and perennial herbaceous species, but also new growth from things that resprout from their stumps. A lot of our species of brush do that. Any kind of like shrub or subshrub generally. There are a handful that don't resprout, but they all come back from seed and need fire to help their seeds germinate. So all of that new growth is really, really nutrient rich, and that nutrient-rich new growth cycles through communities, all of these ecological communities through grazing, browsing from deer, insects, birds. It really kind of has a boom of nutrients when you have fire go through. Cultural benefits um, include this indigenous people's connection to the land, and so it really like having um, having a practice to connect to the land is incredibly important. And we, like Aurora had mentioned, we work with our indigenous tribes, both at Mount Diablo and throughout the state in various capacities, and getting input from them and having them out on the land while we are burning together. Um, and in these cases, you know, the plans that we do, the objectives that we use are all informed by our Indigenous partners. And so this really is a huge benefit for their connection to the land. And like Aurora mentioned, the like traditional ecological knowledge. This is kind of helping with a revival and something of a resurgence of this knowledge that in a lot of places in the state and this area included was pretty thoroughly wiped out with the peoples during colonization. And so this is a way to start to learn how to apply that knowledge once again to the landscape and on a change landscape, like we talked about uh, with an abundance of fuels and new species that have come in, and with climate change altogether, starting to learn how this traditional ecological knowledge applies to the land that we see today. And then there are benefits to society. And really the main benefits that I see our practices to helping society are that it highlights our need for our societies to more widely participate in the stewardship of our land. And it's kind of this ethos around, like, when the land isn't healthy, neither are we. It's like, it's like if your neighbor's not well, then neither are you. And we are all connected in this. Um, and so our practices are like one small step in recognizing and helping our neighbors to recognize that we are taking steps to um, create a healthier system around them for the benefit of all of us. And we get questions a lot. I get questions a lot around, like, why do we need fire specifically to manage these lands when there are so many other options? And so we're going to do a little bit of a comparison around different land management tools that we have, that yeah, that are often brought up and are used pretty widely in land conservation by a number of different agencies. And so grazing, manual fuel reduction, I guess I could say manual and mechanical fuel reduction, and herbicide use are all really widely used tools. And all of them are valid, and they all serve a purpose. And I generally like to think that that they're all necessary in their own way, and that really tools like this are best when they're used together, um, and with a focus purely on the ecological benefit of the land itself, because that is our goal as California state parks, is to, like Aurora said, like, provide the highest quality recreation, and the way that we do that is to provide the highest quality ecological systems for people to be in, to enjoy. Um, and so when all of these things are taken into account and used in that fashion together, uh, they create kind of an integrated approach to land management. And here's just kind of some examples here, where on sort of the upper right corner are some examples of mastication, which is like a mechanical method. And so those were, that was a method that we were using to actually create a control line for a prescribed burn. And so this tool is really applicable in a lot of places, especially in places where you have a fuel type that um, likes to have really intense fire really infrequently. So generally, a lot of our chaparral um, only wants to burn every like 30 to 100 years, and it burns really intensely. And so in those places, if where this kind of fuel type is growing up against neighborhoods, you need some other way to manage it, where fire is just not going to be applicable. Um, In the upper left corner, there's an example of grazing, where grazing has definitely has its place within the land management realm. It it also has some drawbacks, and namely, it's possible for grazing to be detrimental to the landscape by reducing the cover of fine like leaves and duff that are going to help to build soil. And that also allows for soil to dry out and for soil temperatures to be really high. And grazers also are known to be vectors to spread around different invasive plant species. Um, where I know, equipment and boots also can be vectors for spreading stuff around. It's a whole lot easier to clean pieces of equipment and boots than it is to, flush, like brush animals and get animals clean, so that they don't spread seeds around. Um, and in the middle and bottom left is a little bit of an example of manual removal, where you actually have crews of people coming in with chainsaws and removing things. And again, that has the ability to be harmful if people are cutting things that either clear cutting or not paying attention to the plant species and the diversity that they are keeping. Um, and we have, especially at Mount Diablo, we have different plant species uh, that are endangered. And so sensitivity around those species is really important. However, it is an important tool in land management, similar to mastication, where there are areas where fire is not appropriate and we need to be able to manage that fuel load. Um, and so kind of a combination, all of these with fire um, are necessary to be able to run a program and to return fire to this changed landscape. And fire also has the potential to have negative impacts. Um, you know, uh, Oftentimes, when fire is applied strictly for fuel reduction, uh, there's less focus on the ecological benefits, and uh, fire can be applied under conditions in which it can get too hot, and you can start to really change the feel of the landscape and change the structure by killing trees and um, and uh, killing like small brush. If it's applied too frequently and too hot, then some things that don't resprout won't have the ability to create new seed before the next fire comes through. And so there are I guess there are potential negatives for all of these, and I think that the main takeaway is that with a focus on the ecology of the area and a goal of promoting native plant biodiversity, um, that all of these tools have their appropriate place in the management of it. And when all of it is taken into context, it can be a huge benefit to our landscape. I know there's a lot more that we could say about it, but I think we'll kind of wait and hear your questions at the end. Um, so I think from here we will talk a little about how the potential for fire working for you, for the general public, and how you can get involved in different ways.
So if you are a landowner and you are interested in using fire in your own management of your property, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. Cal Fire actually provides burn permits for various different types of burning that you might be interested in doing. The link for those, the information on those permits is on the screen there. It's burnpermit.fire.ca.gov. And I'm not sure how many of you know this, but when you go camping on certain federal lands, you may need a campfire permit, and CAL FIRE can help you with that if you're interested. Additionally, California has something called prescribed burn associations around the state. And these are associations that look to help private landowners apply fire on their properties. There currently is not one in Contra Costa County. But if you're a leader and you are interested in getting one of those started or just learning a little bit more about them, I highly recommend you visit the website. That's the second link on your screen. That's calpba.org. And you can check out what's around the state and get some more information about exactly what they do and how they might be able to help you. Mason, do you have anything more you want to say about Cal PBA or Cal Fire permits?
Well, yeah, so PBAs, even though there aren't any PBAs currently in Contra Costa County, there are a lot of neighboring ones. And PBAs are just made up of members of the public, volunteers. Usually there are a handful of people who are funded through grants to help organize. Um, uh, but they're they're really great folks, and they're often really willing to help other people out. So definitely, if you're interested, reach out to a neighboring PBA and ask some questions, as I'm sure they'll be able to help you find what you're looking for. Mm, Yep, and I think that's it. And with that, say a big thank you to everybody who attended, and look forward to reading some of your questions here.